Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to worship here at UCC Church. My name is John. I serve as pastor. We're so glad you're here, especially if you are visiting with us this morning, and we welcome those who are online this morning as well. We want to just invite anybody, if you're having a birthday this week, you want to raise your hand. We're honoring birthdays. Any birthdays in our midst this week? Okay, how about, over here, happy birthday. Any anniversaries we'd like to honor this week, or milestones? Okay. We continue this week with our Lenten theme of Into the Wilderness, and we're going to do 2 weeks on the backstory of the wilderness, the big Exodus story, but the backstory of the early kind of Moses story. And we start with Shiphrah and Puah, the Hebrew midwives of Egypt. So that's what we'll be contemplating today. It's a tough story, so just let you know. We also have a revised Land and People Acknowledgement that our team has been working on, and where's Beth? Will come up and lead us into that.
Good morning. So the Truth and Healing Around Colonization group wants to thank you for the insights you shared with us about the new people and land acknowledgement. Drawing on your feedback, we've revised. As a writing teacher, revision is crucial. I know. But we wish to share with you today and in the weeks to come this new version. We'd like to read it today together aloud as a congregation, and you will find it on the back of your bulletin. And as before, there are slips of white paper in the pews, and some members of our group will be around during coffee if you wish to share further thoughts. So you can stay seated for this, and I will lead, but I'd love it if you join me. In the interest of truth and healing, we acknowledge that the Salish and Kalispé people have lived on and cared for this land for thousands of years. As part of Western expansion, settlers claimed this valley, including the land upon which this church is built. As witnesses to the historical and ongoing harm done by colonization to indigenous peoples, lifeways, and the land, we commit to learning from the original peoples of this place, to building friendships, and to taking action to work toward a more just and equitable future. Thank you.
We are an open and affirming creation justice church, cultivating joy and justice through the life and teachings of Jesus. As we come from different places to be here this morning, online and in person, we remember that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here.
Please join me in the Threshold song. I'm going to sing it through once and with Alice, and then y'all join in, okay? The wilderness will lead you to your heart, where I will speak integrity and justice with tenderness. You shall know. Long have I waited for your coming home to me, and living deeply our new life. Wilderness will lead you to your heart, where I will speak integrity and justice with tenderness. You shall know. Long have I waited for your coming home to me, and living deeply our new life.
We gather in the presence of God to encounter love that sets us free. We do not come seeking crowns of justice, but a way of life that liberates. Together we practice courage in resisting evil and rejecting the temptations of complicity and complacency. The Spirit leads us in power and truth. Our faith is placed in love eternal that lifts broken spirits and brings new life from places of ruin. Oh, that is neither narrow nor fragile. We come to follow Christ.
Please rise as you are able for hymn number 212, O Jesus Christ, Make Grateful Hymns.
We'll continue with our peace. May the peace of Christ be with you. Share peace with your neighbor. Okay, we're going to take a pause for our connection minute. The invitation is to find a partner, one person, and we'll have a conversation. The question today is about, I'm calling it holy resistance. Can you think of a time that you have practiced resistance to something that you just didn't want to do or you didn't think was right? We'll call it holy resistance. Okay, we'll bring ourselves back together. Thank your partner for a conversation. We invite you to take your seats. And we invite our children to come on forward. Megan is out of town, and we have Rabbi Mark Kula with us to lead our children's time. Come on forward.
Whoa, that's cool. Look at that. Hi, guys. Have a seat. So boys and girls sitting here, and the boys or girl who's sitting out there just with more age numbers. This is a story for everybody. And I'm going to show a picture first. Because they say a picture is like a whole bunch of words. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's 1,000? Okay, thank you. Oh, here's a picture from my Bible with pictures. It tells a whole story. What do you see in the picture? What do you see? You see a baby. Yep. And they're in the water. Is the baby in the water? Or where's the baby sleep? in a basket. Does everybody see that? Right? And there are a couple of women around helping. He is sleeping in the basket. And that is his mother and his sister. And the boy's name is... Yes. How'd you know that already? I didn't even tell the story. Oh, you started the story at home. That's pretty impressive. This is the story of Moses in the basket. It's a very old story. And it starts like once upon a time, a long time ago. There was a little baby named Moses. And he wasn't safe. And people weren't treating his family and his community nicely. They were treating them as slaves. You know what? I can't explain why people treat other people not nicely. That one I'm not smart enough. But what I can tell you is it's really important to be safe. And so Miriam, Moses' sister and his mother, decide that they want Moses to be safe, just like we want all of you to be safe. And they take baby Moses and they put him in a basket. And he goes onto the Nile River, and Miriam watches as the basket goes down the river and goes up and down on the waves and around into the crevices until it goes up to the palace where Pharaoh lives. And Pharaoh's daughter sees this basket and opens up the basket and sees, who does he see? Moses. Baby Moses, yes. As a little baby in a beautiful blanket. And she says, I need to take care of this baby. I want to make sure that children are safe, even though they were not safe there. And she takes baby Moses into the palace and raises baby Moses as her own child. And it's a great story. Why? That's another. I know you think I have answers here, but no. Why? Because, I'll tell you why. Because she had a lot of love in her heart. And we want everybody to have love in their heart and to treat other people nicely. And as Moses was in that wilderness, out on the water in the Nile, who knows what could have happened. But because of love, Pharaoh's daughter, whose name is Batya, which means a daughter of God. We are the children of God when we take care of each other, when we love each other, when we're kind to each other. And all of you are in our prayers to be safe and to know a lot of love and to be kind to everyone around you. And to that prayer we say, Amen. Good questions today. We're going to stand up and go to the Sunday school. And your parents will go with you and drop you off, and we'll see you a little bit later.
The readings today are Exodus 1 and Exodus 2, and John gave a pretty good entrance to that, so I'll just read it. Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase and, in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and they did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this and allowed the boys to live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every boy that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you shall let every girl live. Exodus 2. Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her attendants walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to bring it. When she opened it, she saw the child. He was crying, and she took pity on him. This must be one of the Hebrews' children, she said. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get you a nurse from a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, yes. So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she took him as her son. She named him Moses, because, she said, I drew him out of the water.
Please rise if you are able for our scripture response.
Spirit
I don't know who picked this text. Might have to think about that. Today we continue with our theme of wilderness stories. This is not a story that actually takes place in the wilderness, but a story which the lead characters are in extreme circumstances and are pressured to decide who they are, what their priorities are, and how they will act, even under the threat of death. Often when we think about wilderness stories, the iconic story of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt in the desert for 40 years, where they have to discern who they are and how they understand their relationship with God. What's just as important, though, is the backstory of where Moses came from, to understand that he was not acting alone. You could say that he was part of a whole resistance movement that had started even before he was born. I know there's maybe part of us, part of myself, that says these are 3,000-4,000-year-old stories from the other side of the world. Why do we lift them up? Why do we care? Well, history has a way of coming back around and around and around. In the last few years, we've heard a lot of fear and rhetoric in the public of anything that has to do with the suggestion or teachings that there is systematic or ongoing oppression of any groups of people within our country. This framing comes from a perspective that wants to believe that any acts of racism or sexism or queerphobia or anti-Semitism or anything like that are not systematic, but rather committed by individual bad actors. This is a perspective within our society and maybe within us personally that deeply wants to uphold the inherent goodness of our country, of our people, the American dream, that all people have an equal chance for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this hanging on has escalated across our country and in our state and has led to the banning of books that talk about systematic oppression of any kind, the changing of public education curriculum. The truth is we'd rather not feel bad about our country or about ourselves. Well, if you're going to ban such books, then you probably need to ban the Bible. It's right here in this story and many other places. Anecdotes and stories about systematic oppression. Stories of attempted erasure of people based on ethnicity or race. You see, they had a new Pharaoh who didn't remember Joseph, that he had interpreted a previous Pharaoh's dreams, helped Egypt stockpile 6 years of surplus grain so they could endure 6 years of drought, and basically helped them build a whole lot of wealth and power. Everybody praised the Israelites in those years, but now there was a new Pharaoh who was threatened by those who are different, who might threaten his own power. So this started with a Pharaoh making calculated political decisions to undermine potential opposition from a minority community within his reign. But to oppress a whole group of people, it's a systematic effort. Which means you have to have a whole campaign of misinformation suggesting how horrible these Hebrew people are, how dangerous or unethical they were, or that they didn't worship Pharaoh like everybody else, to help people justify the oppression that they put on the Hebrew people. It would help them feel okay about putting them into forced labor, to deal harshly with them and unfairly. That's the systematic. We're all in this. Now, is everybody in Egypt hurtful against the Hebrew people? Of course not. In fact, today's story, we have the daughter of Pharaoh putting her own life on the line to save this baby from the reeds. And we can guess that there were other Egyptians willing to help and be part of this resistance. But we might also ask, did all the Egyptian people benefit from the forced labor of the Hebrew people? Absolutely. Wealth was built on that free labor. That might have meant lower taxes or better roads or a bigger army, better sanitation, all kinds of things that were beneficial. Maybe a manufactured sense of safety and a manufactured sense of superiority. That's how systematic oppression works. Everybody's in on the big lie around this other group of people. And if the lie gets told over and over, eventually everybody thinks it's true, or at least lives as if it were true, and eventually makes policies and laws and customs based on those supposed truths. And then there's the economic and social benefits to the dominant group because of the lie and the laws and the customs that follow. And that kind of systematic oppression is alive and well today. Those were the kinds of stories I grew up with in Michigan, living outside of Detroit, not so many years ago, about black people from the inner city. So many white people living out in the suburbs were afraid of those who were thought to be so dangerous. There were whole neighborhoods that I was instructed not to go into because it was so bad. Even my Sicilian family, who had moved out from the inner core themselves not that many years previous, kept a watchful eye and were so concerned about which neighborhoods black people were moving into, always with a "it's getting so bad" lament. And there were sensationalized news stories to back it up. And statistics were thrown around, like around higher crime or violence or bad schools. But the badness was perceived to be about the people themselves. Later, I went to college at Central Michigan University and ended up with Billy as a roommate, a black kid from the very same neighborhoods I wasn't even supposed to go into. And it turns out Billy wasn't so horrible. He was an 18-year-old young man, just like me, with hopes and dreams of his future, who loved his family, trying to make it. But he was trying to make it in a world that put a mark on him, so much so that everywhere he went, people were nervous and anxious. They would cross the street just to get away from him if he was walking towards them, or cower to the side if he came in a room. But that wasn't on Billy. He didn't do anything to deserve that kind of treatment. And he tried to ease people by smiling and laughing. He had encounters and had to overcome hurdles and prove himself every day in ways I never imagined. I was able to see it because he took me in as a friend. And I spent many days with him, and I could see the fear and the hatred, the doubt that he had to be ready for, to try to avoid, to handle, just when we left the room. And these were compounded when Billy engaged with the law, or walked into a bank for a loan, or went to the doctor, or any other facet of community. He was just trying to live his life as a good person, and that was barely even possible as a young black man in Michigan in the 1980s. We might wonder if anything has changed, and say, yes, they've changed. How have they changed? Maybe things are different. Maybe there's more awareness and advocacy and organizing and opportunities and change of hearts. In churches across our country, there is movements and advocacy and nonprofits. In the ELCA that I come out of, we have an African descent advocacy and organizing body that actively works with nonprofits and churches and movements. Across our country, there is all kinds of change happening. Yes. Pastor Yolanda Kali Denson Byers writes, "It has been one of my greatest honors to be called by God to live in my truth as a female, Black, and queer pastor. It is a bonus that my willingness to live with transparency, authenticity, and joy has inspired others to courageously do the same. Especially in the ELCA, it's been a delight to see other BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and queer folks publicly living life without shame. One of my greatest queer mentors told me when I was fearfully coming out that the only real abomination would be as if I failed to live as God had created me. I will never forget that." Yes, there have been tremendous changes. And the big lie lives on. Going back to our biblical story, there was systematic oppression of the Hebrew people, and within that we get stories of resistance and resiliency. Today we have Shiphrah and Puah who refuse to kill the male babies of the Hebrew women. We have the Pharaoh's daughter that decides to save this Hebrew male baby, and the baby's sister who volunteers to find a nurse who happens to be the baby's mother, who agrees to raise the child in secret. There are 5 women, Hebrew and Egyptian, working together, risking their lives, trusting in God to do what was needed and what was right. That's a network of moral conscience, grounded in God's deep love for all life, working together, building trust across cultures, resisting evil as it manifested in their own lives. Later, when Moses is older and eventually comes back, these are probably the women that he's going to start with. The network that is already there. A movement that is in place, waiting for the time of bigger action. So if we are a community that is grounded in Jesus' vision of God's deep love for all people in life, and are called to lift up human rights and the dignity of every person, we have to remember these stories. We have to remember the stories of when and how people were not granted dignity or livelihood, and notice how it's still happening in our lives today. We need the stories, and we need to retell the stories, even if they're awful, so that we remember what was at stake and what happened, that we can remember the treachery of human evil. We are called to remember the stories and the communities of resistance, the faith they had, the risks they took, the fears they overcame. And we can draw on their stories and their strength and their faith in our own time. Every day, if we turn on the news, over and over, we hear the rhetoric of how bad the people at the border are, how they're going to ruin our country and destroy our way of life. It's the big lie, getting repeated over and over again. It's the same rhetoric of the Pharaoh all those years ago. And we hear the voices that call to silence the truth tellers who want to deny our history, keep the status quo. And we know the stories of this land are important as well. Part of what I like about our new Land and People acknowledgement, it says, as witnesses to the historical and ongoing harm done by colonization to indigenous peoples' lifeway in the land, we commit to learning from the original peoples, to building friendships and taking action towards a more just and equitable future. This is a commitment to be historical and ongoing witnesses to the big lies and the atrocities of human rights. For instance, we commit to remember that just as this church was being founded in the 1890s, the Bitterroot Salish people were forcibly marched from this valley up to the Flathead Reservation. And soon after were forced into a system of individualized land ownership and privatization called allotments that led to severe hunger and poverty, and eventually many tribal people losing their land to white settlers. We commit to remember that all of the children were forcibly removed from their homes and sent to boarding schools, where they were not allowed to retain hair or language or beliefs or remnants, but instead forcibly taught Western knowledge and Christianity. We commit to listening to the stories of brutality and despair that were carried out for the benefit of settler hopes and dreams. We also commit to hearing stories of resistance and resilience, of tribal people holding on to their history and identity and wisdom, of retaining dignity and power and sovereignty despite these attempts at erasure. And we commit to learning from indigenous leaders and wisdom keepers, to making friends and working together for a just and equitable future. As Jesus people, we are committed to God's deep love for all life, to the dignity and sanctity of all people. We are held by that promise of God's love and God's deep yearning for liberation and for equality, that all people might find love and joy and safety in their lives. And so we listen to the stories, and our families, and in our neighborhoods, and across our whole region, and we say, okay, God, where can we be partners? Where do we need to be listeners? How can we be lovers and allies? Where might we take action and take risks for the sake of the other, for each other, for ourselves? And so with Shiphrah and Puah and Miriam and the Pharaoh's daughter and so many who have gone before, we carry on in faith and love and open hearts. Thanks be to God. Amen. We invite our ushers to come forward. We give to God and the work of this congregation with our offering.